Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Barb.
Hi. Oh, lots of people are here.
Yeah. Okay, well, slightly after 6:30, so we'll get started and people can join anytime. The first item on the agenda is to approve our minutes from March 17th, which is our last council meeting. Is there a motion?
I'll make a
Hi,
motion.
Okay, Barb makes a motion.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor?
All right.
Okay.
Any opposed or abstaining? For the people who aren't using their cameras, which is fine, and are also muted, which is fine, we don't know if you're voting or not. I guess we'll assume that you're in favor unless you unmute yourself and, Madison just put a thumbs up. That's one way to do it. Okay, next item is the treasurer's report. Randall?
Okay, we currently have $4,775.98 in business checking, an additional $4,296.86 in savings. We did just this very day receive a $3,000 check from the ACE funding from Salt Lake City, which is, as far as I know, the only income that we ever get. It's primarily used for Jam Fest. It is pending my remote deposit and should show up in the balance shortly. Other than that, there was only the only transaction of recent, there was only one transaction in April for $10 to Utah corporations for a business corporation license of some type. So that's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, very good. Moving along. Want to announce that we have an opening for one board member. Two people I know of have already expressed an interest, but it's still open. So if anybody would like to become a member of our board, you're still welcome to apply. If you're interested, you can send an email. I will put the email in the chat right now. You can send an email to that address, or you can call me, and that number, which will appear here momentarily. Either way, we'll take nominations or volunteers for another week, and then at the May board meeting, we'll take a vote. The person whose term the new person would be filling actually ends this year. So whoever takes that position will be up for re-election next year if they want to continue. Are there any questions about that? Okay. I'm
Who's
sorry.
leaving?
Yes.
Who's leaving? Who's leaving?
Jack Shelburne.
Oh, that's right. It's bad.
Okay.
What information, David, are you looking for sending you an application? Or
Well, I just got an email on your behalf, Jackson, from Brian, and it's fine. It's just, a little bit of information about you, how long you've lived in the neighborhood. It's not like a job application. It's not like we're going to compare people's credentials. It's just so we know a little bit about who you are. That's all. Okay, the next announcement, and I see John Mitchell is on the call, and this concerns him. I'll let him explain it, but the city is asking every community council to form an urban forestry committee so that the urban forestry division of the city government will have somebody to talk to in every neighborhood. John was contacted, I guess, or maybe he contacted them, but he was on the board of the CHNC until this year. So why don't I let John explain what this is about and ask for volunteers?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. I don't know a lot about it, but and if Eva Lopez is on with us, maybe she can back me up. But this whole thing started after the big wind last year that blew over all the trees in the city. And the mayor appropriated money to replace those trees. And that initiative is going to be implemented through community councils in Salt Lake. Although anybody can be a part of it. You don't have to be a board member of any specific council. It will involve replacing trees, assessing trees, possibly adding new trees. And I think our role will be somewhat of a supervisory role about getting the trees in the ground and maintaining and educating the people about how to nurture these trees and encourage them to grow. That's all. Any questions?
Let me just clarify. I know that all the current board members are as busy as they can be with their current committee assignments as well as the general board meetings. So I would like this committee to be composed of just members of the community. John has agreed to chair it, I think. Haven't you, John?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great, thank you. And I will be the sort of board liaison, but this committee will consist solely of community members, no board members. So please, anybody who is interested in joining this committee, you can contact the council in the same two ways as I already put in the chat box. You can either email that address or you can call me. And I hope that people will step up. This is a very important issue, and taking care of the trees once they're planted is something that sometimes doesn't happen. So having a group that educates folks and sort of follows up a little bit on making sure that any trees that are planted are well maintained is very important for their eventual growth and for the appearance of our neighborhood. So I hope people will volunteer. Sounds like fun to me, actually. Any other questions about this?
Yeah, I have a question. Can you
Yeah,
hear
go
me?
ahead. Yeah.
I know that I really appreciate that you mentioned that board members are pretty taxed and busy. Still, I think that is a decision for them, unless, is there a problem for a board member to be involved if they choose to?
No, I was just trying to defend you guys.
Oh,
No, I'm glad you asked the question, Anna, because of course, any board member who's got a dog who's not muted.
Sarah could mute.
All right. Well, anyway, so yes, thank you for clarifying that. And of course, if any board member wants to do this, they're more than welcome.
but not obligated. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I didn't mean to say no board members, just trying to respect the fact that you guys already work very hard. That's all.
Thank you.
I have a question for John. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go
Nick?
ahead, Barb.
John, does that, can, like, say I want to put some trees in my park strip, do these qualify, or is that a different part of the group, for urban forest?
I don't know if it's specifically park strips or actual front yard properties. But probably park strips, because that's those properties the city the city and the owner are both responsible for.
Thank you.
Ava
I don't know.
Lopez put the name of the liaison for urban forestry in the chat.
Thanks. Sorry, David. I didn't want to interrupt since I know you have allocated time for me, but just to answer that, that's the person you want to contact. And yes, it is for the park strips in the front.
Thanks, Ava. Any other questions about the
Yeah,
urban forestry
Barbara,
committee?
Minta here.
Minta, go ahead.
Strip. there was old trees, real bad, and I phoned the city and they sent up the arborist, and he agreed. That's when I first moved here. And they took them right out and they give you a pick of what kind of tree you want. And they come and they put it in and give you instructions, and mine's been in forever. So you just have to call the arborist.
Okay. Nick, did you have a question?
Yes. Every time I ask somebody if they want to be involved with the council, they always ask what the time commitment is. So what do you anticipate the time commitment would be for the new committee?
That's a really good question. And Brian wanted me to whip up a bunch of people to get involved, and then I think the fine print is going to come forth, the details. Just like any other group that I know of with the city, with the neighborhood, it's those people who want to put in lots of time. You can put in a lot of time, and those people that don't, there's an opportunity for that as well.
Like this group, like any other volunteer organization, I mean, it's up to the individual to decide how much he or she wants to spend on a project. People shouldn't avoid signing up because they're afraid it will take more time than they want to give it. They will have full control over how much time they spend.
Well said, David.
Any other questions or comments about the urban forestry thing? Okay. I want to announce that we have a change in the agenda. Nick Norris, the director of Salt Lake City's planning division, was on the agenda originally to speak today. When I put the full agenda together, looked at it, I said, that's a lot of stuff for an hour and a half. So I contacted Nick, and he graciously agreed to postpone his presentation until our May meeting, which will be on May 19th. So if anybody was tuned in just to hear Nick, I'm sorry, you'll have to tune in next month. But there's plenty of other good stuff on the agenda, so not to worry. And so our next council meeting will be May 19th, same time, same station. So put that on your calendars, and hope to see everybody here again next month. Okay, we'll move along to our public officials who are with us, starting with Kristen.
David.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah, we had 5 minutes, remember?
You want to do that now? Go ahead.
Yeah. So just on the transportation committee, we have a few things I should make everybody aware of. We did get a site visit. It was a 2.5-hour site visit from Salt Lake Transportation, led by Scott Vardalos, and we started at the site of 500 North West Capitol, which is a site of numerous T-intersection blow-throughs with cars hitting cars and houses. And then we rolled down to Zane and Wall, the site of many car versus house collisions, and with the help of Jackson Bradshaw, who assembled a fantastic presentation for the Salt Lake Transportation to see, and it actually made it on KUTV. And then we rolled down to Center and 2nd West and 6th North and talked about one of the sites that for some urban artwork, and also a test site for traffic management. We also we have a team who conducted the video log rooftops at the intersections of 4th West, 6th North, and 3rd West and 6th North on top of Saturday cycles, and then over at 10th North and 3rd West. And we got the download of all that data to the committee, and we're starting to dissect it. We have some instructions by Salt Lake Transportation on how to go through that process. And then we have a meeting we're setting up right now with Staker Parson to review some of the findings. And we found some really bad behavior by industrial truck drivers. And last but not least, the noise ordinance information, Glenn McBride has been spearheading, and he's been working with Councilman Wharton, and I'm sure that Councilman Wharton will have something to say about that. Thank you. If anybody would like to help with the data separation of the video log, please put your name in the chat. It's pretty cool how this works, and you distinguish vehicle type, behavior, turns, speeds, etc. And it is a very powerful tool that was handed to us by Wasatch Front Regional Council. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, Chris, why don't you go ahead?
Yes. Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here, and I have some positive news of progress that we've made. So I'm really excited to share that with all of you. As Brian sort of alluded to, the city attorney so previously I'd come to you and said that part of the problem with enforcing the modified muffler ordinance was that a district court had found the ordinance to be unconstitutional. And we thought that we would need to basically redraft the ordinance in order to make it something that could be enforceable. So I was invited to a meeting with the administration last week, and Glenn McBride was there. And they basically told me and Glenn that the city attorney's office had changed their interpretation, and that they feel that the current ordinance is enforceable either with the city code or with the overarching the overarching county noise ordinance, as long as the city invests in this equipment where police officers can measure the decibel levels of noise that is being put off by these modified exhaust systems. And so the police department indicated at that meeting that they think that they have enough money to purchase several of these pieces of equipment that will help them in the enforcement effort. I told them that if they don't, that I think that this is something the council would definitely entertain and want to fund, especially if it's for citywide efforts to enforce noise, to obtain this equipment. So it's great news, because it means that the efforts that we had previously directed towards trying to get enough council members to make this a priority to redraft the ordinance, we don't actually have to go down that road anymore. I mean, I'm a little bit curious as to what caused this change in interpretation, because I wasn't really made aware of that until that meeting, and we did spend a lot of time and effort on trying to gain support to change it. So, but it is what it is. It's still good news, and I'll take it even if it's late. And I hope we'll be able to move forward and see an actual measurable, forgive the pun, difference in measuring these loud mufflers that are contributing to noise pollution in our neighborhood. And then, as I said to you, I've already said that I would commit to doing anything I can to try to raise the funds to get these pieces of equipment if it turns out that the police department's not able to cover them. The other benefit is that I asked specifically, okay, I know we had a legal issue, but we also had an issue in terms of making this a priority for officers, because out there doing traffic stops, it is difficult when we have all these other unmet policing needs in our city and wait times that are going up. And the captain that was on the phone with us indicated that he thought that they would have enough bandwidth to do some concentration of that effort. Obviously, we're not going to get everybody, but that is a huge improvement from what we have heard for the last couple of years. So I'm really excited about that change. Also related to traffic, I did in a previous meeting with Brian and the traffic transportation subcommittee had committed to contacting Staker Parsons about these new trucks, these new big black trucks that are coming through the neighborhood that are really loud. I was able to connect with Travis at Staker Parsons, and he said that the last time the city had reached out to them last year, they did make it a big priority that these black trucks were a new contract that they had. And they were glad that we reached out to them because they were going to do a sort of retraining of their employees and the contractors they work with to make sure that this new contracting entity, I'm not sure the name, but they have these big black trucks to give them the same information. They also said that some of the reason why we are seeing right now heavy truck traffic come through the neighborhoods at a higher rate than we have in the past is because of two major projects that are in Salt Lake City where there's no way to take the freeway to get to them. And that would be the Temple Square reconstruction and the construction that's happening up by the Huntsman Cancer Center. And the only way to access those points is to go through our neighborhoods in D3. But hopefully, once those projects are going out of the whatever phase they're in where they need a lot of concrete, that will lessen. But in the meantime, they're still going to try harder to obey the noise and be sensitive to the neighbors' health concerns that we raised. Lastly, I had a meeting with Bill Knowles, who previously lived in our community or our neighborhood council district. He used to live on Capitol Hill, and asked him about, whatever happened to the effort to trying to slow down some of the traffic on Capitol Hill. He gave me a lot of really good insight. And even though he's moved out of the neighborhood and now lives in Sugar House, has agreed to help work with me within the city to try to reignite that conversation. And so I told him about the work that the Transportation Committee has been doing. And he did offer to give some of his time and some of his connections toward that effort. We just had an initial conversation, but it was very positive. And so once I'm able to get a little more feedback from him, I'll get him linked up with David and Brian to give more information. The next big news item, and there's been a lot that's going on in the city, but I know we're short on time. So if you have questions about other issues, please email me. The next issue I want to touch on that affects us in District 3 and the city, most of the city council districts in the city, is that last night the city council voted to implement ranked choice voting in Salt Lake City for the 2021 municipal elections. So what that means is, for those of you that aren't familiar with ranked choice voting, instead of just casting one vote for the person that you want in the primary and then casting another vote for the person you want in the general, we will not have a primary. We will have just one election in November that'll be primarily vote by mail, that you'll be allowed to rank the candidates in order of preference, 1 being your first preference, 2 being your second, et cetera, et cetera. There was some concern on the council about whether or not voters will be ready for this, or there'll be enough time to implement it and educate everybody. I think that there will be, and I really hope that this group, you as individuals who are well connected, and this group as our neighborhood councilor, will help us get the vote out. And interestingly, like, a majority of the city was already going to be up for re-election, because this is the year that districts 1, 3, 5, and 7, so me included, it's our year for an election. Also, because of the vacancy that was announced and effective today by Councilmember Johnston, because he had more than 2 years left in his term on the council, whoever the council selects to replace him will also stand for re-election in November. So we'll actually have 5 of the 7 city council seats up for election in November, and it will be this new system of ranked choice voting. So it's really critically important that you talk to your neighbors, talk to everybody you can, put it on Facebook, put it on your other social media, letting people know that we are going to do ranked choice voting this year, that we're really excited about it, but that we have a little bit of a shortened timeline in informing the public. But the overall goal of this is to have more participation and to have more civility in our elections. And we want to start with that right here at the local level. So I know that was a lot of information. I'm sorry to kind of just give you a big dump of all of that stuff. But tell me more, or let me know if you have any other questions, or if there's things that I can answer. I'll post my email and phone number in the chat, so you can reach out to me anytime.
Great, lots of good news. Thank you,
Thanks.
Chris.
Yep.
Okay, Ava.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. My name is Ava Lopez, and I'm the community liaison. I wanted to share real quick some exciting news. I've requested to be moved into a different part in a different role, which got authorized. And so I'm excited. I'll be staying in District 4. However, starting in 30 days, you'll have a new liaison I'll get to introduce to you. She's a part of our team and currently represents District 6. It's Jamie Stokes, and she'll be now working in District 3. I asked to free up resources so that we could have another liaison on the west side of our community specifically. However, I'll be engaging all over our city, specifically engaging with communities that aren't organized, such as renters or folks that aren't currently connected with our office, as we look to have an equitable approach to our engagement. So it'll allow me specifically to be more interactive in Districts 1 and 2. So I'm really excited for that, and I'll be happy to introduce her here at the next meeting. I also wanted to share here some information. We are in a stage 1 drought, and I'll put in here our articles that have information about what that means. And when we enter a stage 1 drought as a city, it is voluntary water conservation. However, we are very close to a stage 2 drought, and I see Kristen Reicher here. She might be able to go more into detail on that too, but what we want to avoid is entering that stage 2 drought. We've never entered it in the history of Salt Lake City, but it puts us in a position where we have restrictions on our own facilities and use of water. So please, if you can, take a look at this. Didn't connect the link. I'll put the link where you can read on how to conserve water. We also have a rain barrel program that allows you to capture rain and use that in your gardening or however you'd like. So that's really helpful. Of course, you may have seen Councilmember Wharton touched on this, but Councilmember Andrew Johnson did officially resign as of today. We don't have an official start date for him, but he will be our new Director of Homelessness Policy and Outreach, which is a position we didn't have previously. So we're really excited to have this along with the new position that the state just enacted, which means more help in housing folks, in helping keep our neighborhoods safe and enforcing on different policies that we have existent. I wanted to share this. Please share with the individuals that you know in District 2, if they're friends or community members that you know should be running. Here's the process, and it goes through the dates in which they can start applying. You can start applying as early as April 26th for this position. So please share that. And of course, you may have also seen in the news, our mask mandate was expanded. The last data that I saw on this is we're about 23% of the way full vaccination as a city. So we're still really behind, and we plateaued for a while as far as infectious rate, but we're slowly starting to climb again. So this is why the mayor has expanded that mask mandate. So please be safe, keep wearing your mask and respecting that mask mandate so that we can save lives together. I also wanted to share this. I know you'll have individuals talking to you about the Reimagine Nature Salt Lake City survey. So I'll let them explain, but I do want to put this survey in here so that you can go ahead and take that, and that helps us form our master plans as far as what green space we want to develop and what our neighborhoods and communities want to design for the future. I already shared with you the urban forestry liaison information. So again, the subcommittees for urban forestry was created as an idea to help maintain and preserve our trees as a city. This would help us in a way where our saplings can survive to full maturity, which is about 3 years. So we need folks that are interested in helping water and feed and maintain these these trees and making sure that they have longevity of life as long as possible here. So please contact Nate. And of course, you've got an amazing chair, John. Thank you for stepping up to chair that subcommittee. That'll be really great. And other than that, you heard the noise ordinance update. One part I wanted to add to it is Rachel Otto has reached out to our justice courts to express the importance of prosecution as these citations come in. That's been another part of contention where we may cite, but the courts would overthrow it. So now having this procedure of gathering evidence, having a case opened, and then it going to the justice court to be prosecuted and fulfilling that citation is going to be helpful to enforcing this. So we're really excited to see that finally.
Okay, thanks very much, Ava. And that was a great introduction to our next speaker. Kristen Reicher is the director of Salt Lake City's Public Lands Division. And she's going to tell us about the new Public Lands Master Plan, which they're in the process of creating. Kristen, take it away. Are you muted by any chance? We don't hear you.
You don't hear me. Uh-oh. Okay.
I can hear you, but it's very, very faint. Can you get closer to your microphone, perhaps?
Yeah. Let's see. Can you hear me now better?
Not very well, I'm afraid.
Okay, maybe can you go on to somebody else and I'll try to see what I can figure out to fix that problem. Sorry.
You're doing better, and the person who's going to follow you hasn't logged in yet.
Okay, well.
Yeah, that's very good. Go ahead.
Okay, can I share my screen?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Okay, let's see. Technical issues.
No, we got it now.
Okay, awesome. Well, I know you're a little bit short on time, so I'm going to run through this. My name is Kristen Reicher. I'm the director for Salt Lake City Public Lands. And we are in the process of doing a comprehensive master plan for Salt Lake City parks and public lands. You may have seen a presentation previously. This is our second round of public engagement. This slide just shows you who we are: natural lands, city parks, urban forest, and golf. This map just shows the extent of public lands. We have over 70 miles of trails, 80 city parks, 108 holes of city golf, and thousands of acres of natural lands and 86,500 urban forest trees. So the master plan is informed by the 2019 needs assessment that we conducted. And so it tells us where we have gaps and where we have needs. One of the really interesting facts that came out of the needs assessment was that 87% of the people that were polled thought that it's very important for residents to live within a 10-minute walk of a park. So we're working really hard to fill those gaps. Okay, so this was our public engagement window number 2, and we made over 7,000 connections with community members, which we're really proud of. We did a lot of work to try to make sure that we hit every community, and we did ice cream, food, pop-up trucks, trailside snacks, and to reach some of the more diverse communities and underserved communities, we worked with the University of Utah Community of Metropolitan Planning, and they did intercept surveys in our parks, in our at restaurants, and then when we found that we were still lacking folks, we did some micro engagement groups to make sure that we covered everyone to get input. This diagram just shows the master plan framework. Stewardship, livability, and equity are the value lenses. And these are our plan goals. And I'm going through some of this fairly quickly. The website that Eva put in the chat will go through it more if you're so inclined. But I just wanted to share that our goals are to connect, creating connected and green accessible spaces, creating welcoming, active, inclusive places, protecting public lands through a commitment of stewardship, growing and expanding our park system, and sustaining our public lands by focusing on environmental health. So now we're at a stage where in the plan where we're trying to synthesize all of these initial ideas for your feedback. And that link is a link to a survey that goes through these 10 transformative projects that came out of the initial survey. So I'm going to go through those briefly, and feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions. This first one here, 5 minutes from here, is a wayfinding and signage campaign that makes it easier to explore parks, trails, and public spaces. So it's really putting in multilingual signage so people know where our parks are, they know where our public libraries are from our parks. And then it will promote green space use of school grounds and other municipal facilities. Connect Mountains to Lake is also a big initiative that came out of this. And this is to connect all of those missing trail links from the mountains to the lake. Wasatch Mountains to the Foothill Natural Area, there's the 9 Line, the Jordan River Parkway Trail, and let's see, we are also wanting to implement the McClellan Trail, Folsom Trail, Surplus Canal Trails, and the Foothill Trails. This initiative would also look at the Seven Canyons Greenway vision, which is a regional system of greenways along the city creeks that will uncover creeks and add trails and improve the natural habitat. The third transformative project is to reimagine our neighborhood parks. A lot of our neighborhood parks are older and need some improvements. This picture is of Artesian Well Park that was recently done, but it would look at an equitable park redevelopment across the city. Where should we spend our funding? It would engage neighbors in redesigning and adding active parks that reflect their interests. It would really try to look at the character of each neighborhood and the culture of the community and try to infuse that in our parks. So excited about that one. The fourth transformative project is coming soon to a park near you. And this is to really activate our parks through activities and events throughout the year. It would look at partnerships for arts and music and performance, provide programming for nature-based education, volunteerism, outdoor recreation, and recognize city parks and neighborhoods by adding concession operations that could potentially generate revenues and reinvest back into our parks for repairs. Meet Me at the River is a project along the Jordan River that promotes equity, access, and beauty along the river. It would integrate some more welcoming park spaces, landscaping along the river, bringing the river into focus as one of Salt Lake City's major destinations. Right now, our needs assessment told us that quite a few people feel unsafe along the river, and particularly at night. And so this would open up the river a little bit more, add more manicured spaces. It would restore and enhance natural areas also. It would look at improving the Glendale Water Park, the Jordan Park, and the International Peace Gardens along the river, and also establish a self-serve kayak rental program on the Jordan River. Tell Our Stories is really about telling our history of our parks and giving a focus to underrepresented and Indigenous people in our parks. It would express these stories through interpretive signage, placemaking, public art, and it would just basically tell our stories with partners in the cities to make people more aware of how the parks came about and who's living in the neighborhood and how it's been used. It would invest in interpretive signage structures. We would look at Allen Park and restoring Allen Park, Fisher Mansion, Warm Springs Park. Let's see, go on to the next one. Downtown Comes Alive Outside is really about improving the activity downtown. Really, we only have one downtown park, which is Pioneer Park. This would look at downtown Salt Lake City's first park ever, which is Pioneer, and try to invest in that park to add daily activities and events that would activate the park. It would reimagine downtown Salt Lake City's wide streets in specific locations to develop the green loop with trees and green spaces. It would create projects and partnerships to integrate a network of large and small green areas and plazas throughout the city, and then grow downtowns and central community parks access, where future growth is expected to be the highest and access to parks is the lowest. Grow Our Urban Forest is about building awareness to help us learn how to care for our trees. You know, a lot of our trees are in your park strips. Many of them are in parks and on municipal buildings, but a lot of them are in park strips, and a lot of people don't really understand how to take care of their trees. And so this would be an educational campaign. It would also invest in tree planting in our street projects. A lot of the street projects are difficult to plant trees because of the public utilities. And so it would invest funding in
Excuse me. Would everybody please mute themselves except for Kristen? That sounds like a police scanner.
Yeah.
Would you, okay, that's better. Thank you very much. Sorry, Kristen.
That's okay, thanks. It would also, this is a really cool initiative because it would also invest in an urban wood reutilization program. So right now, all of our, the trees that we take out that are dead of, you know, from your park strips or in the parks end up going into the landfill because we don't have any way to manage them. So this initiative is really cool in that it would help fund the purchase of equipment and a storage area to create usable wood products. So think mulch, playground chips, and possibly even some boards that could be used in city parks with our urban forest. Welcome to the Green is all about our golf courses and opening the golf courses more to the public. This would incorporate some environmental benefits such as more tree plantings, diversifying the vegetation in our golf courses, would look at stormwater management, and we'd look at rewilding some of the unusable play areas of our golf courses to create natural habitat, not only for plants, but also wildlife. And then expand golf's environmental protection by incorporating constructed stormwater wetlands in unplayable areas. This is the last one. Last one is put the environment first, and this is to cultivate more biological diversity in our park areas. And this one is super important also. Fosters a robust native plant and pollinator habitat program. We would work with volunteers and create some educational opportunities for the public, build greenhouses for public lands so that we can propagate native plant species in our public lands. It would also increase landscape resiliency to climate change by reclaiming some of these degraded landscapes that are found in some of our natural areas, such as the Jordan River or in the foothills, so that we can put in more native plants and bring more of the wildlife back to Salt Lake City and support their environment. Okay, so this is my last slide. We are inviting you to take, it's a 5-minute survey. We want at least 7,000. We'd love to get 10,000 responses on this survey. And basically what we're asking for is for you to help us prioritize and give your input on these 10 transformative projects. Oops, hello. So this is the web page, and you can access this at reimaginenature.com. It shouldn't take you very long to do that. And I am going to try to unshare my screen now. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
Well, thank you. That was a great presentation.
That-
Does anybody have any questions for Kristen?
Can you put that link in the chat so we can just go to it after this meeting?
Yes, I think that Eva did do that, but I will do that again. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does the city have any kind of service that homeowners can appeal to who are interested in xeriscaping their grounds?
Ooh, not through the parks and natural lands areas. I don't know the answer to that question. Eva might be able to find that and get back with you. I can, I'll see what I can find out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, I was gonna just answer quickly. So I've heard this answer before, and what I was told is that the city council was gonna look at allowing xeriscape. Currently, there's not an appeal process to do it, so you would get fined right now. But because of the drought, that conversation has started in our office.
That's great. That is overdue, I think. My wife and I are currently thinking about doing this to our own property, and it's surprisingly hard to get reliable advice about the kinds of plants that will thrive in low water conditions in our particular elevation and in this particular biome. So I was just curious if the city had any people who might assist homeowners in that way.
I would just say that I went to the Weber Basin Water Conservancy, like in Layton, and they have a learning garden where you can learn about all kinds of different plants. They have them all planted and they have signs and they show you different sprinkler systems. Like, it's a really great resource.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's great. That's good to know.
I've got a bunch of questions, but I'll probably wait and ask you some of them. But Kristen, your presentation really sparked a lot of imagination. It reminds me of Boston's, emerald necklace. But it sounds like what your plan or what you're envisioning and having me envision is something even cooler. And where do you see it coming out? I probably have a bazillion questions, but I'm curious where it would come out to the lake, and if you're working with the same, what is it, the urban forestry program that was mentioned earlier, and maybe you already said that and I bleeped it out, but.
Yeah, so we are, the group that I oversee is parks, trails and natural lands, urban forestry, and golf. And so that the forestry program and watering the trees is under me. The trails, and specifically the trail out to the lake, we would need to purchase land to do that. And so the exact location of that hasn't been determined yet. We would look at the canal trail to go towards the lake along the Jordan River Canal.
Well, very cool. I'm going to check out your website, and I'll post your survey in an email blast. So thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. If anyone wants to post it on their social media or email it to your friends, the more we can get the word out, the better.
Great. We do have
I wanted to ask a question real quick.
Sarah.
Sorry, I took the survey, and I think in one of the things, maybe it was whatever it was about activating your local neighborhood parks, maybe was where it was, but Warm Springs and specifically this building was mentioned in one of them. And I wondered if that was part of this initiative or one part of it.
Yeah, so Warm Springs Park is managed by the Parks Division, and also the Gateway Park, which is on the north side, is managed by the Trails and Natural Lands Division. So those two parks are are what we would be reimagining. The plunge building is not managed by us. That's more of a facilities, and the city is actually looking at the plunge building as well and what we can do to stabilize the building and then imagine what we can do in the future. But that would be a separate master planning process for that building.
Okay, anything else? Well, Kristen, thank you very, very much. I think it's very exciting, and we will do our best to get our community to respond to your survey.
Thank you so much for having me. Everybody have a great night.
You too. Okay, our next presenter is Dr. Brian Mensch, who is the president and founder of the Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment. He is going to tell us about the Utah Inland Port. The Utah Inland Port, many of you are aware of probably in a general fashion, but we found that a lot of people are not too aware of the specifics of the development. And I think because not only because it happens to be near our neighborhood, but also because its effects are going to be throughout the Salt Lake Valley. It's very important for everybody who lives here to know what's going on out there. I think it's very important for people to not only inform themselves, but also speak with the officials who are in charge of this and make their opinions known. So I'm going to let Dr. Mensch begin, and I am going to share my screen and show slides as he speaks. Brian, you're muted.
All right. Can people hear me?
Yep.
Good. So this is the first time I've tried to have someone else run my slides, so I hope we can work that out well. So we're on slide number 1, I take it, David, is that correct?
That's right.
Very good. Well, thanks to everyone for listening for a few minutes on this issue. It's very important. The Utah Inland Port is proposed to be the largest economic development in the history of the state. If it proceeds, it will cost Utah taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. So Utahns need to know the facts about the port and decide if they think this is a wise investment. First, what is an inland port? Inland ports exist in several cities, and they've actually been proposed in other cities as well. They relieve congestion at coastal ports by allowing shippers to go through customs at the inland port rather than a coastal port. At an inland port, imported shipping containers are opened and inspected, and containers for export are sealed. Inland ports are also generally serving as intermodal hubs where goods for distribution throughout their region are loaded onto trucks. The Utah Inland Port Authority, sometimes referred to affectionately as UIPA, UIPA, was created by the state legislature in 2018. It governs 25 square miles, known as the UIPA jurisdictional area, shown here in blue. Almost all of this area is within Salt Lake City and comprises about a fifth of the city's total area. The UIPA board consists of 11 members appointed by various politicians, most at the state level. Being appointed, the board is not accountable to the public. While fossil fuel and mining interests are represented on the board, it has no members who are experts in public health or conservation. UIPA exists to promote development within its own jurisdiction. The main tool it uses are financial subsidies it gives to private landowners. It also contributes to building infrastructure such as roads and utilities. The land within UIPA's jurisdiction is privately owned. Most of the land is owned by 3 or 4 large companies. The largest is Rio Tinto Kennecott, obviously a multi-billion-dollar foreign-owned corporation. So does a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Rio Tinto Kennecott need subsidies from Utah taxpayers? So how does UIPA work? State legislature gave UIPA the power to overturn land use decisions and overrule local governments. This guarantees that land use regulation continues to favor developers, by taking land use control away from local governments. The legislature deprived them of one of their most effective tools for protecting their own residents in doing so. So where does the Utah Inland Port Authority get the money for its subsidies and other expenditures? Well, it receives funding from the state government, often by indirect means. It can issue bonds for which Utah taxpayers will ultimately be responsible. It can assess and collect user fees. However, most of its funding will come from property taxes on new development within its own jurisdiction. This means, for example, that if a piece of property today is worth, say, $10,000, and a warehouse is built on that raises its value to $1 million, UEPA then collects the property tax on the difference, $990,000. The tax on this added value is called property tax increment. Before UEPA, this money would have gone to municipalities and school districts, but Utah taxpayers have no voice in how these funds will be used. Why are the subsidies for developers needed? Well, soils in the area become soft during earthquakes through a process called liquefaction. Liquefaction destroys buildings by causing parts of their foundations to sink, as shown in this picture. Special expensive foundations are needed to overcome this, which is why subsidies are needed for development to take place in the area profitably. Without these subsidies, the area would remain undeveloped and the port could not be built. So far, within the UEPA jurisdictional area, roads, sewers, water lines, and power lines have been built, which now primarily serve the new state prison. Several warehouses have also been built. Now, these are ordinary run-of-the-mill warehouses with nothing green about them. Together with the parking lots that surround them, they cover nearly 100% of their land with surfaces that don't absorb water. In several cases, this allows polluted runoff to flow into the waterways. The plan for the port is very vague. UEPA hopes warehouses and light industrial plants will be built within its own jurisdiction. It projects 152 million square feet of new buildings when the port is complete. That may take a couple of decades. That's about 5.5 square miles, almost enough to cover the entire city of Midvale. For years, the Union Pacific Railroad has operated a rail terminal in the port where goods are transferred between trains and trucks. A second rail terminal operated by another railroad company, however, is essential to the port's viability in order to keep shipping rates competitive. Now, who will really benefit from the port? Will working Utahns benefit? There's a possibility, but it's unclear what kind of jobs it will provide and whether those jobs will pay well enough to support a family. We'll discuss this more in a moment. Developers, however, are practically guaranteed to profit from the port, thanks to the taxpayer subsidies provided by UEPA. Now, speaking of jobs, UEPA claims that the port will attract companies that will create thousands of well-paid high-tech jobs. In fact, it is far from certain that many such companies will choose to locate within the port. In inland ports and other US cities, most of the jobs created have been warehouse jobs, and many of those jobs don't provide benefits such as healthcare. Furthermore, many of these jobs are likely to be reduced or eliminated by automation in the near future. The Utah Inland Port is not limited to the site of Salt Lake City. Recent legislation allows satellite ports to be created anywhere in the state. Several of these sites are specifically proposed as fossil fuel transloading facilities, mostly for coal. As a major contributor to global warming, the global use of coal is obviously decreasing and will continue to decrease. Utah's economic future, however, should not be a bet on the future of coal exports. The coal producing parts of the state would be better served by investing in programs to help them establish new and sustainable industries to employ their residents. Now, everyone knows that the Salt Lake Valley suffers from unhealthy air quality. Most of our air pollution comes from motor vehicles. The port will generate enormous increases in the number of cars and trucks traveling our roadways. The completed port is anticipated to generate approximately nearly 70,000 additional truck trips every day and an additional 152,000 car trips every day. Besides tailpipe emissions, recent research has shown that a substantial amount of pollution comes from friction created by tires on the roads, brakes, and other sources. This is a source of pollution that has not been accounted for in current plans to improve air quality. In spite of repeated public demands, UEPA has refused to study the impacts of this tremendous increase in vehicular traffic on our air quality. There are other types of vehicles and equipment at the port that will also affect our air. Dozens of diesel-powered switcher engines are used in Union Pacific's existing rail yard. These are antiquated and emit enormous amounts of pollution, and they run 24/7. A second rail yard could double their impact. In the past, the state has tried to give millions of dollars in subsidies to Union Pacific to upgrade just a few of these engines. On their own, however, Union Pacific has done very little to upgrade them. Now, will taxpayers be asked to further subsidize another multi-billion-dollar corporation? The port will also generate large increases in air cargo flights. These are also major contributors to air pollution.
Some guys.
Another impact of port development is water pollution due to runoff. This is rainfall that buildings and pavement prevent from being absorbed by the groundwater. This water accumulates pollutants that have settled on these surfaces. If not properly handled, these pollutants end up in streams and groundwater. Untreated runoff can promote the growth of invasive plant species, and it also enters animals' food sources, harming them and any humans who consume them as food. Now, due to its proximity to the port, Salt Lake City's west side will be disproportionately affected by the pollution caused by port activities. This will greatly compound the long-standing environmental injustices suffered by minority and low-income people for the sake of corporations. The port will increase pressure for massive spraying of pesticides to control the mosquitoes and other biting insects. The wind will carry these chemicals into homes and schools on the west side, North Salt Lake, and West Bountiful. The most commonly used insecticides are neurotoxins. That's how they kill insects. These are chemicals that affect the human nervous system as well. They have been shown to harm fetuses and children in particular. Development of the port will destroy thousands of acres of wildlife habitat, now home to pronghorn and many other species. In particular, migratory birds will be impacted by the port. Great Salt Lake is recognized as an area of hemispheric importance for migratory birds, a major stopover for millions of birds every year. The lake provides feeding and nesting grounds for many species of shorebirds, while upland areas near the shore provide habitat for owls, hawks, and other species. Destroying or even disturbing these areas will harm bird populations throughout the Western Hemisphere. The huge increase in traffic that I mentioned earlier will overload our roadways. The state will have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to enlarge existing roadways and perhaps build new ones like double-deckering I-15 in order to prevent widespread gridlock. These costs, of course, will be borne by taxpayers, adding a huge hidden cost to the port. To counter the environmental risks of the port, UEPA claims that it will be green, quote unquote. This word is conveniently vague. It seems to promise a clean and sustainable development. In reality, however, the port cannot be considered clean or sustainable. UEPA frequently mentions emissions reductions through the use of electric cars, trucks, and other equipment. However, the actual projected increase in vehicle use will only be a fraction of all the vehicles for years to come. Electric vehicles are no better when it comes to pollution from friction, and they may actually even be worse because of their increased weight. A recent study from Great Britain showed that this friction pollution was actually greater than the amount of pollution from tailpipes. In any event, habitat destruction is inevitable. In short, there is no such thing as a green port. Neither UEPA nor the state government has done anything to bolster electric vehicle use at the port. UEPA has refused to commit to using some of its money to incentivize developers to implement any energy saving measures. UEPA also claims that the port, by facilitating the export of Utah's alfalfa crop, will have a statewide economic benefit. In fact, alfalfa is a tiny fraction of Utah's exports. Together with related crops, it represents only about 0.8% of the value of Utah's export totals. However, alfalfa production uses about 40% of Utah's precious and dwindling water resources. Exporting alfalfa amounts to exporting water. Does that make sense in the second driest state in the country that is now under extreme drought conditions that are projected to continue and likely get worse? Political and financial interests in Utah would have us believe that the Utah Inland Port is a done deal. And they do that to discourage the public from questioning the assumption behind the port and its real impact on their lives. But the
Would everybody please mute themselves, except for Brian? Getting some background noise there.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. But the port is not a done deal. It has barely begun development. Key pieces such as the second rail yard are far from certain. A poll by the Salt Lake City Tribune found that 60% of city residents oppose the port. The public must demand greater transparency from UEPA and have meaningful input in its development to minimize its harmful effects on our health and quality of life. Public opposition to the port has already had real impacts on its development. First, it's become clear to everyone that the port is controversial. Businesses and potential investors that are dependent on goodwill with the public are wary of controversy because it raises doubts about the port's future, and they don't want their businesses' names attached to something that is unpopular. Port activists have raised numerous questions about the impacts of the port that deserve study before the port proceeds. More and more people are becoming aware of the potential harm of the port and what it may do to their lives. Finally, by engaging respectfully in UEPA's board, in the UEPA board's public meeting process, port activists have revealed that the board really suffers from a lack of transparency. Not only has the board refused to address many legitimate concerns, their procedures prevent meaningful public input in important decisions. Questions are being pursued about whether the aspects of the port's development violate the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Local runoff treatment requires, and open meeting requirements may require, in fact, the involvement of NEPA. Using public record requests, information is being obtained from government agencies that is being withheld from the public about the port and satellite ports. If the port is allowed to proceed, Utah will be set on a path of no return towards an unsustainable future with more air pollution, worse public health, and further sacrifice of natural areas for a narrow vision of economic development. In addition to that, the state will be seen as a notable contributor to the climate crisis, which scientific organizations are now calling an emergency. While under the Biden administration, a new commitment to addressing the climate crisis is being broadcast to the world, Utah's inland port sends the opposite message and will stain our reputation nationally and internationally, and in doing so will likely hurt other businesses. The port represents another sacrifice of the public interest for short-term corporate profit. To summarize, the Utah Inland Port is being touted as an economic boon, but its proponents have overlooked or downplayed the likely harm it will do to our environment, particularly to our air quality and to our wildlife. These harms will again fall disproportionately on the residents of Salt Lake City's west side. The port's advocates claim the port will be green, but in reality, the port's operations are inherently unsustainable, and proposed mitigation measures pale in comparison to the harms that the port will cause. The port's governing body, the Utah Inland Port Authority, has ignored constant public demands to evaluate, let alone address, the impacts the port will have on public health. Many people believe that a port is a done deal, but it is not. It is a project that has barely gotten underway, an enormously expensive public project whose details are not being openly shared with the people. The people of Utah have every right to question and demand transparency of the officials in charge of the port. Should we decide that the port is not in our best interests or those of our children and grandchildren, we do have the power to stop it. Now, you can get involved in the effort to demand greater transparency and accountability from UEPA. First, spread the word. Tell family members and friends and neighbors and encourage them to find out more about the port. In the process, you may also be able to correct misunderstandings many people have about the port. It's not a done deal. There's a great deal of public opposition already to it, and that will grow. Its economic benefits are questionable. It poses many threats to public health and the environment that authorities are not studying or even acknowledging. UEPA board meetings are open to the public, even during the COVID-19 pandemic. Visit their website at inlandportauthority.utah.gov for information about board meetings. You can write letters and emails to your state representative and senator demanding answers and greater transparency from the UEPA board and the state legislature. The Stop the Polluting Port Coalition has weekly meetings where you can receive the latest information and join various actions as your time permits. Most importantly, you can be part of a growing popular movement to ensure our children and grandchildren will be able to lead healthy lives and be able to enjoy the natural beauty of the state of Utah as we have. Thank you very much. And any questions?
Yes, I have a question. Oops, let me get my speaker down. So at the very beginning, you mentioned about building on these lands, that the tax money would not be going to the schools rather than to the inland port, I believe, if I understood. But a question that popped into my mind is, if these buildings were not being built, there would be no tax money, is one thing that would go to the schools. So, you know, that's kind of a back and forth issue. And then, I don't know if you have any comments on that. And then I had another comment.
Well, yes, if the land was left as basically an uninhabited area, occupied primarily by wildlife and birds, you wouldn't be able to tax that.
Right.
But to create any sort of mechanism by which that land can be taxed also creates all the problems that we just addressed.
Right. So, and to me, it seems like you really can't say that that money would be taken from the schools because it's not there in the first place.
Well, that's true. We're using that as an expression of the fact that this is a very unusual arrangement in terms of where money collected would actually be spent and under whose authority and who has the right to have decision-making input into the way tax dollars are spent. This would be a much different setup.
And then the other thing, and this isn't really probably to you because you've done your presentation, but we've had 2 or 3 presentations here at our council meeting, and I feel like all of them have been one-sided. And to me, it seems like we need to find out, okay, what are the benefits if we went through with this? Maybe there are some benefits that other people might see. And I feel like we need to hear more than one side of this. And that's not directed really to you, Brian, because you're on the one side. So you're not going to want to present the other side.
No, that's a legitimate request. And we certainly invite you to pursue any other entity that can make the positive case for this. We have been digging into this with representatives of multiple community and environmental groups. We've spent, at least once a week for hours at a time, probably for 3 years, digging into this issue, finding out what inland ports have done to other cities, and finding out what experts would predict will be the consequences if we proceed with this. And what we presented tonight is a summary of what we have found through hours and hours and hours of evaluating the situation, looking at all the evidence throughout the country where other ports have been developed. In particular, if you're interested in this issue to the point where you want to do some reading, you should read about what has happened to the Empire Inland Port in Southern California and what has happened to the surrounding neighborhoods there. The people now have nicknamed the community around that inland port a diesel death zone, because it is a highly concentrated area of air pollution from diesel emissions, harming their health to the point where a recent consent decree required that the city now provide air purifiers in all the homes of the people nearby. That in and of itself tells you an awful lot about the consequences.
Hey, Brian, Jeff Carlton, a couple comments. You said that 60% of I'm not sure what the population was are against it. 60% sounds like it's Salt Lake City, not necessarily the state of Utah. My second comment would be, under what possible scenario do you see this conservative legislature turning around and saying, oops, sorry, we made a bad decision, and we're going to reverse that?
Well, I don't see Utah's legislature becoming immediately enlightened anytime soon. However, here's why a lot of us, David and I, and many other people and many other organizations are still working very hard at trying to stop this development. And that is, if you look at the websites of other cities that are other inland ports, one of the themes that sticks out constantly is successful inland ports require acceptance and buy-in on the part of the public. And one of the reasons why is that businesses do not want to invest and have their name attached to something that's very unpopular. And so I think even if the legislature doesn't have a come to Jesus moment, pardon the expression, I think if businesses shy away because they know that the public really doesn't want this, then it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to develop it, regardless of what the legislature does. I mean, obviously, the events of the last few weeks nationally have shown that businesses do care about their public image. Even Rio Tinto Kennecott, a multinational, multi-billion-dollar corporation headquartered in London, they care about their image here in Salt Lake. And if they have their name tightly attached to something that most of the people in the Salt Lake Valley don't want, then I think that really creates some serious obstacles for further development, regardless of what the legislature wants to do.
Thank
you. I wish I could have a more optimistic view of the legislature agreeing with us, but I don't think that's an essential ingredient to stopping the port.
I have a question. I guess one more neutral stance I've heard is that the land is already zoned industrial, so there's going to be industrial development there either way, whether the port's there or not. And I just kind of am wondering what your response is to that.
You want me to take that one, Brian?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
The city zoned it all for light industrial back in 2018, hoping to forestall the states taking it over. Development, I mean, Madison, you're a planner, you know. Development happens only if there are certain conditions met, one of which being that there is sufficient infrastructure. A piece of land that you can't access is not worth very much. A piece of land that has no water, no power, no sewer is not worth very much either. The subsidies that UIPA provides in part go to building that stuff. They need it anyway for the prison. And now you might wonder, was this in the mind of the legislators when they decided to put the prison where it is? But the mere fact of the zoning doesn't guarantee anything.
And zoning can be changed. It can certainly be changed much more easily than undeveloping an area that was inappropriately developed.
Another question. So in our society, we ship. Everybody wants to buy stuff online. So it's a fact of life, there's going to be shipping someplace. So if we don't put it here, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree, I'm just, where can we put these that are in a safer environment?
Well, if you notice, whatever you order right now, be it from Amazon or whomever, you get it quickly already. This proposed massive warehouse farm is not going to change that. If we don't build it, that doesn't mean you're not going to get whatever goods you order and expeditiously. This is not necessary for people to still order products online.
And also, the Salt Lake Valley has plenty of land area that is not environmentally sensitive as this place is, in which further warehouse development can take place. In fact, the UIPA jurisdictional area includes areas south of I-80 that already are partially developed as warehouses. And the argument that Brian is making doesn't apply to those areas. I mean, that's a done deal. You know, that's already built out with infrastructure and a lot of warehouses already, and can be further developed that way. So it's not a question of having or not having the capability of delivering goods to Salt Lake City. It's a question of where you put it.
I might mention one other thing that certainly is an important consideration right now and will be going forward. We expect that the water consumption of the businesses that would develop in the inland port will be substantial. And we already know from what experts predict in terms of our future, that water will be an increasingly diminishing resource. And to have any sort of development going forward that just ignores that reality makes absolutely no sense.
Brian, you have a question?
Yes. So you mentioned Rio Tinto. They have created a mountain of tailings pile from the Great Salt Lake emanating, 6 or 7 miles east along I-80. They already have an environmental disaster on their hands that neither the state nor the county nor the city have addressed. And I'm wondering when this proposed port is going to involve or require a lot of fill. Do you have any modeling or estimates as to how many delivery trucks would be required during the construction phase from, say, the gravel pits just to the north of us? I mean, this is something that will strike a chord with this neighborhood in Rose Park and Glendale just during the construction phase.
I don't have any modeling to offer you, but conceptually what you have raised is a very significant issue. I've been as sequestered as anybody during the pandemic, but I have made a few trips to North Salt Lake, and the amount of dust that is kicked up by that gravel pit and asphalt plant just around the corner there is substantial. And I see that as only getting much worse.
Do you think, how would we bring it? Who is it? A city's responsibility, the county's responsibility to study that aspect and have it entered in the discussion?
This is a problem with many aspects of the port. Almost no study has been done of any of the aspects of its construction or economics, for that matter. If this were a private enterprise, it would never get funding from a bank with the lack of information that has been presented about its ultimate cost and its ultimate feasibility in terms of economics. Nobody is, as you put it, nobody is responsible for studying this. You would hope that the board of the inland port would do it out of a sense of public responsibility, but they are not. in spite of loud demands from the public that they do it, especially with regard to public health.
Well, for example, the traffic figures that we gave you a few minutes ago, those are figures generated by experts who have volunteered their time on this issue. The UEPA didn't come up with that. They don't feel any obligation to. There's no state or local entity that is taking the lead in trying to make assessments like this. It is only volunteer groups like the one that David and I are a part of that are trying to come up with critical answers to questions like that, and including what the issue that you raised.
Let's see. I think somebody else had their hand up. I'm sorry. Why don't you
I had
just
a quick
go ahead.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, two. One is, do you have, I saw that you had a URL. Do you have any other resources for information? And then the other thing is, I just wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit about, Chris mentioned in the chat, the court case, the lawsuit that's going on. I'm not super familiar with this, so I was just wondering if you had any additional information.
Well, maybe Chris would like to explain that. He probably has a better view of it than any of us.
Hi, sure. So the way that the inland port was created was the initial creation of the port was opposed by Salt Lake City very strenuously. And we were trying to work with legislators in good faith on a way to do something with that area that would be beneficial, but also sensitive to the environmental concerns. And unfortunately, in the second to last night of the legislative session in 2018, the legislature passed it through both chambers in about 40 minutes, which is pretty fast. So there was not a lot of time for public feedback. In the years since then, so based on that, and based on some of the implications of the law under the Utah state constitution, the city filed a lawsuit against the Inland Port Authority on that basis. That went to trial in the district court. The district court found that the legislature had not violated the state constitution, and the city appealed. That went on direct appeal to the state Supreme Court, and the oral arguments on that were heard today. And I included a link just so if you're interested in following those arguments, you can do it. In the time since then, the city has continued to try to work with the legislature to negotiate on some of what we feel are the worst parts of the inland port, both environmentally and in terms of violating the local authority to plan, zone, and tax, and how that will work. So it's been a complicated process because we're talking about the law in two different respects. We're talking about a lawsuit, and we're talking about trying to improve law that has already been passed and is still under review by the court. So so that's the status of the litigation. At this point, the Supreme Court can take pretty much as long as they want to decide these issues. But it's important to know that even if the court finds that the state violated the state constitution in the way that the inland port was created, that there are other ways that the legislature could legally reach the same result. There would be, and I'm talking about the absolute end result. I'm not talking about some of the collateral consequences along the way, which are obviously really important to Salt Lake City, or we wouldn't be going through this exercise. But we think that that we do need clarity on this issue, and that if the court were to invalidate the way that this was created, that it would benefit Salt Lake City, in that we would be able to be brought back to the negotiation and bargaining table to address some of the biggest concerns that we have as a city about the port.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any other questions?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead,
Is-
Nana.
Brian, is there a group like businesses against the inland port?
Well, there are certainly many businesses who mirror many of the concerns that I've raised tonight. With limited bandwidth and virtually no funds, we've done an awful lot of volunteer work. But if we had a mirror and looked at ourselves and said, what could we do in the future to improve the strength of our opposition, getting more businesses involved would certainly be part of that.
Okay, so right now there's not a group yet, businesses against the inland port.
No, not to my knowledge. And if there was, I think we would know about it. But one of the obvious problems is that when very powerful business leaders and powerful legislators are still pushing this, there's a limit to how far out businesses want to push opposition, say to entities like the Chamber of Commerce, which is a supporter of this. So we can certainly do more, and we'll try to do more to get businesses engaged, but there's a limit to how much I think we're going to be able to rely on them to magnify the opposition. When we tried to develop a strategy on this 3 years ago, our strategy basically centered around trying to really mobilize massive public opposition. And that poll that we mentioned a little while ago during the presentation was taken in the fall of 2018. So almost before none of this opposition really had developed. So already without a lot of knowledge and without a lot of organized opposition, 60% of Salt Lake Valley residents were opposed. And we think that if that poll were to be taken today, it'd be much closer to 80%.
Well, thank you for presenting tonight.
Sure.
That was a great presentation. I thought so.
Yeah, David and Mike, can you share links to your organization and other links? Well, we have almost 30 people here pretty interested in this topic.
Yeah, I'll type the thing into the chat.
Thanks.
Any other questions? We would encourage you to get involved. We see this as probably the most important issue on what the future of the Salt Lake Valley will look like, if not the entire state. And we don't like the future that we think this project paints for the residents of the valley and our families, our children, and our grandchildren. So we would encourage you to get involved.
Thanks very much, Brian. It's a little past 8. I was hoping we could have some time for open mic for people to just, speak up about anything that's on their minds. I don't mind hanging around a little while to give people that opportunity. So is there anybody who would just like to sound off about something? Really? Wow. Okay. Well,
I think Sylvia wants to sound off about something. I can tell.
I'm sorry.
No, I just want to say thanks to everybody who's worked on the port. That's such a huge project. Just thank you.
Okay. All right. I'll have a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
Okay, Madison makes the motion and John is seconding it. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, then we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Keep checking on our website to see what the latest and greatest is in the neighborhood, and we'll see you real soon.
Thank you,
Hey,
David. Good
David.
meeting.
David, before you sign off,
Yes.
that phone number that was on, I wrote it down. I was